We had an Advent retreat in our former building, our church's former building on Middle Belt Road in West Bloomfield, shortly before we moved. And it was one of those, the last significant non-Sunday morning worship events held there. And it was a unique experience. I'd purchased art supplies. And long story short, we had a time of devotional creativity in which people were encouraged to use paints, pencils, and other items to generate something that was somehow Advent related. Okay, now it's time for the disclaimer here. And I made this disclaimer there at that event, I remembered. This was just, what I just told you was just really not me. It was out of my comfort zone. This whole thing greatly stretched my comfort zone. In fact, I might not have even, I know I would never have even thought about what art supplies would even be needed, what I might even get for this occasion, were it not for participating in a workshop only a few weeks before this Advent retreat that inspired the topic of creativity at Advent and the form that it actually took, culminating in hands-on art projects. See, I don't consider myself gifted in the visual arts. That's probably putting it mildly. I never have. I was the sort of student that made something in art class and I had to explain what it was that I created because it was definitely not immediately evident. I always believed that my parents were kind when I gave them what I sculpted, drew, or painted because they smiled. But deep down, I was just sure that they were asking, is it this? Or maybe it's that. But they still used it. They still put it on the refrigerator with a magnet. But I never quite trusted that they were confident about that original intention of what it was that I was trying to make. So here I was leading a retreat in which I was uplifting the virtue of visual artistic creation. The absurdity of that scenario is that I was surrounded by people who were and are truly, truly gifted as visual artists. It made sense. Who would be attracted to a retreat in which art was being created? Artists. I mean, really, I remember among those who were there, and I may not remember everybody, but I do remember Clinton and Linda Kopus were there. I mean, Clinton's art is renowned. Sue Savage, who makes these amazing cards for us. Martha Richards. I remember they were there, and probably, again, I'm leaving someone out, but what was I thinking? What was I thinking? I could teach nothing about visual art to these individuals. Who was I to be exalting the wonder of creativity among them? They humored me, and I'm very glad they created some really great art that day. But clearly something prompted me to do this, and it had to be something or someone outside of myself, because this was not in my immediate wheelhouse, so to speak. I occasionally, and I know what it was, I occasionally get to go back to my alma mater, the seminary from which I graduated, the University of Dubuque Theological Seminary, as I serve on the school's council of advisors. And they usually time the in-person meeting to coincide with a regular speaker and workshop series that they do in the fall to promote diverse perspectives on contemporary approaches to ministry. They bring in one or more speakers to address a theme or topic. And this particular year, again, just a few weeks before that Advent retreat, it had to do with a unique approach to practicing spirituality through the creation of art. But it's always, always more than just lectures. There's a time in the afternoon where people can choose to go to a workshop led by the featured speaker. There were other options, for me much safer options, like meeting with some seminary faculty to hear how things were going at the seminary or sitting in on a class, and I was so tempted by those other options. But something drew me. Maybe it was peer pressure because Reverend Wendy Van Tassel, who sat on the council with me, was definitely going to the workshop, though she is clearly artistically inclined and gifted, and I am not. I don't know what it was, but I was compelled to go, even though I knew from the description that I would at that workshop, I would have to make something. I would have to create something. Yeah, that was a yikes moment. As I did later with the Advent retreat that we held at the church, various pencils, paints, notebooks, other items were set before us. They were there on the tables, and we had complete freedom to make or create whatever it was that we felt moved to create. I honestly don't remember any specific prompting or suggesting. The only thing was we were to treat it as prayer. We were to enter into this prayerful, meditative space and make something. I was absolutely surprised when my inspiration came rather quickly. I was more surprised at the fact that I actually painted something. I was further surprised that I was so entranced in what I was creating that I was in a zone, and it was actually really hard to finish it. I just wanted to keep being in that moment, keep going. Who was this person? So the question might be at this point, what on earth did he make, and what inspired him? I painted a pine tree with watercolors. It was the autumn before we left our former building and grounds. I knew that was coming, and I was in the process of grieving its impending loss and what it meant to our community. Even though I'd not been nearly as connected to it for as long as many people, many of you even here today, I was processing this as a very real ending point, though always aware that it was also opening up new possibilities and a hopeful future. I painted and I painted that tree, and it actually looked like a tree. That amazed and astounded me. There was no mistaking that what I created was a tree, and that was a triumph for me and has not been repeated despite other attempts. So praise God for at least that temporary victory that day. Painting or drawing or visually or textually or photographically or making anything as prayer was truly accessible to me, at least in that instant. And it helped me to walk through my grieving process immensely. On Good Friday, I think that there are always a couple of temptations about how we as people of faith consider and treat this experience. We either ignore it completely and focus right there on Easter and sunshine and empty tombs. Society helps us with this act of understandable denial when we have to keep everything upbeat or positive or else it's bad or it's wrong. Or we become mired and almost paralyzed by the despair of the day, and the darkness kind of overwhelms us, overtakes us. I'm coming to understand, though, how much perceiving this day and the cross with a spirit of creativity can be helpful, much as my unexpected tree painting prayer was for me. Brian Zond, in his very recent work, The Wood Between the Worlds, a poetic theology of the cross, delves into different ways of relating to the cross as a central image of our Christian faith. He doesn't shy away from it, but examines the cross from many angles, many chapters. He never in the book moves far away from the cross. The cross is always in every single chapter. I found it insightful. Early in the book, he engages the ways in which the cross has been depicted artistically and visually through the centuries. He writes, "From our beginning, we Homo sapiens have created images as a way of representing and interpreting our world. We took up painting while living in caves. We've been doing this for a long time. Clearly, we are a species given to symbolic artistic endeavor. It's not tangential to our being, it's central. Whether in primitive cave paintings or masterpieces housed in museums, we've sought to depict through art that which gives meaning to our lives. Art is a window into the human imagination." Zahn goes on to focus on the cross very directly, inviting readers to reflect on this strange fact. Our single most depicted story image is of a man nailed to a tree. considered from an anthropological point of view, how bizarre it is that Jesus of Nazareth, portrayed as crucified, as the most replicated work of art in human history. This must indicate something deeply significant about the human experience. Zahnd shares his own opportunities with crosses and crucifixes that he's observed. He actually went on the great Camino de Santiago in Spain, and multi-kilometer trip, and he made a point, something inspired him early on, to really focus on in every church that was a stop along the way, to study the crucifixes. He articulates the conviction that is at the core of his book. The crucifixion means everything. Everything that can be known about God is in some way present at the cross. It's the pinnacle of divine self-disclosure, the eternal moment of forgiveness, divine solidarity with human suffering, the enduring model of discipleship, the supreme demonstration of divine love, the beauty that saves the world, the refounding of the world around an axis of love, the overthrow of the Satan, the shaming of the principalities and powers, the unmasking of mob violence, the condemnation of state violence, the expose of political power, the abolition of war, the sacrifice to end sacrificing, the healing center of the cosmos, the death by which death is conquered, the Lamb upon the throne, the tree of life recovered and revealed. And he writes, I've come nowhere near, even with this, exhausting the meaning of the cross. For indeed, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ is an inexhaustible revelation of who God is. Clearly, for Zahnd, meditating and reflecting on the cross is a creative and a generative act. In so doing, we cast off our denial of the value of the grieving and mourning process and acknowledge the reality and potential, even in death itself. It's something we often would not choose to readily do, though it's accessible to us and for us in our own losses and each year here at Good Friday. The late poet Mary Oliver offers the question, how shall there be redemption and resurrection unless there has been great sorrow? And isn't struggle and rising the real work of our lives? So we have to engage the grief. We have to be present at the cross on Good Friday in order to truly be a witness to all that God is doing and all that God is making. Ultimately, that leads us to the conclusion that despite death, which is real, that death, it doesn't have the final word. The prophet, second Isaiah of the exile, knew that the people to whom he was speaking had endured great suffering and immense loss as they were forced against their will into exile. Isaiah never did deny their pain or their experience, but he tried to get them, even in the midst of their situation, to see beyond the immediate, to recognize that God was actually there at work, doing something big, something more, something even creative, in the midst of what they knew as their struggle to live in exile. Despite all of that, your builders outdo your destroyers, and those who laid you waste go away from you. And more than this, they would see reunion following separation, hope after disappointment, and joy that actually emerged out of sorrow. Those ripped apart relationships would be restored. Lift up your eyes all around and see, they all gather, they all come to you, and they shall bring your sons in their bosom, and your daughters shall be carried on their shoulders. On Good Friday, we might remember as well that our destroyers do not outnumber our builders, and God is chief among our builders. The cross is not an ending, but a beginning, if we are able to lift up our eyes and see what God is making, what God is creating, what God is building in and through and even on it. And so it is with all of our loss and all of our grieving and all of our mourning. If we truly enter into the process and don't try to shove it aside or deny it, it actually can be generative, creative, constructive. Francis Weller urges the full undertaking of grief work, suggesting that grief is necessary to the vitality of the soul. Contrary to our fears, grief is suffused with life force. Weller goes further, echoing Brian Zahn's description of the cross being the wood between the worlds of death and life, indicating that when we grieve and mourn, we connect with a deeper place. We kind of make a connection to another world. He writes, within this darkness, we become porous to another world. Some crack or fissure appears in these times of sorrow, allowing us to touch other worlds, if only for a moment. Whatever the experience, grief offers a revelation. In the midst of great loss, we find ourselves in the presence of the sacred. Today, at the cross, we can lift up our eyes and see the ending of one world and the opening of a new one. We maybe even can see that happen again and again and again, not just one time. It doesn't diminish the loss, but it gives us perspective on how important the transitions, even the most difficult ones, are in bringing life to the world. We can start to see not just what's being destroyed, but what God is building because of Jesus' giving of his earthly life. God is giving the chance for a new world to be created, a new order to be established, a new way of life to be lived. And this is fundamentally a generative, constructive act. Good Friday enables us to identify the relationship between loss and renewal, death and life, more clearly, if we allow ourselves to see it. So still the question from this day remains, what are we going to make? What are we going to make, to create, to build on our own crosses? What are we going to generate from our struggle, our suffering, even our sadness? The cross is a disturbing image, to be sure, but it also is the canvas on which God provides glimpses, insights, and invitations to a new world that we can see and which we can co-construct, co-create, and build with God if we can just lift our eyes, not just our physical eyes, but the eyes of our souls and our hearts, and envision it. Amen.